Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. On the last segment I showed you the various recorders, and most of them I have. The only one I don't have are the great basses, but these are the recorders that are used in playing in orchestras, solo work, and all of that. Now you've got to remember that the recorder is not a toy. I know in this country a lot of times it's used as a toy. It is not a toy. It is a respectable, legitimate instrument, and in Europe you have many orchestras in which every instrument in the orchestra, 40 or more, they're all recorders, nothing else but recorders. I arrange classical music on recorders. I play parts of Handel's Messiah on a C melody recorder. And so you can do a lot with them, but of course you can't do everything with them because they don't have side keys and because you can't get all of the sharps and the flats. With most instruments you get sharps and flats, and you've got not only ways of fingering them, but you've got a lot of side keys. The saxophones, the clarinets, oboes, bassoons, and flute, they all have side keys, and you can get your sharps and flats that way, and you can play music in any key that it's written because you have an instrument that has enough possibilities to play in different keys. With a recorder you can play in several keys, but with the C melody recorder, which is what I'm teaching in this class, it is in the key of C, but you can play other keys with it as well. Not as many as you can with a regular instrument, because the way you get your accidentals and your sharps and your flats is to half hole, in many cases to half hole, which you wouldn't be doing in a regular instrument. So let me show you the scales here, and I'll show you which ones we can play with the recorders. Remember that like the C melody recorder has no sharps and flats, so, and this is, the top one is the key of C, and you go up, the lower register isn't in here, but there's no sharps and flats. Now, the key of F has one flat. This would be for the instruments such as the bass, the sopranino, and the alto, all in the key of F. You start with F as your root note, and it has one flat, and that one flat is B flat. You get going up and down. B flat is one flat, and that's in the key of F. That would be natural for those instruments that are playing in F, such as the bass, the alto, and the sopranino. The others are in the key of C. Now I've got a lot of scales here. The soprano instrument, the recorder, can play in several of these keys. Although it's a key of C instrument, it can play in the key of D, which is two sharps. It can play in the key of F, which is one flat. I can fudge it and make it play in the key of B flat, which is two flats, but a lot of these other keys, there's no way that the recorder is going to be able to play them. You can play in the key of G without any trouble, and that's in one sharp. And so if you think of it, here's the key of G right here, one sharp, and the sharp is F sharp. Now it's interesting to know that the key of F is one flat, but it's the B flat that's flatted, not the F. In the key of, let's say, D, you don't have, it's two sharps, but what is sharped is not the D. What's sharped is the F sharp and the C sharp. So you have the title of the scale, but you don't. But the keys that are sharped or flat are not the same as the title of the scale. So I want to show you how that happens, and I'll take this down to show you. Okay, so here's a keyboard. It's not a full-size keyboard, but it's a keyboard. I have drawn full-size keyboards with 88 keys, but this is not the case. But let's pretend that's a full-size keyboard. This is C, and this is your middle C. On a piano, it's going to be middle C, because you've got all of your bass notes to my left that you play, and all of the sharps to the right. So this is middle C to the piano, low C to the woodwinds, because most woodwinds cannot get below that note. Flutes can't go below C. The recorder, C melody recorder, can't go below. The saxophone can go to B flat, so it can go a little bit further. The clarinet can go a few notes further, but basically a lot of the melody instruments only go to C. On your staff, that C is right here, right below the staff. That middle C is halfway between the bass clef and the treble clef. And I've only got it written as treble here, but if I want to write it further, this would be the top note of the bass clef and the lowest note of the treble clef. It sits between them. Now, how do you figure out what keys you're in and what's sharped and what's flatted? Well, you do it by 5 notes apiece. You do it by fifths. And it's interesting because you have to kind of think this through. That music can become quite mathematical. If I start off with C, I know that the key of C has no sharps and flats. Every 5 notes I can add a sharp, or every 5 notes I can add a flat, depending upon what direction I'm going in. So here's your C. C, D, E, F, G. All right, I put a sharp in. So the key of G has 1 sharp. It's not the G that's sharped, it's the F that's sharp. There are reasons for that. I'm not going to go into that now. But supposing we start at the G, G, A, B, C, D. So I add another sharp, so that's going to be the key of D, and it's going to be 2 sharps. You start with the same note that you finished on, and you count 5 more, and you add another sharp. Now, if you're going in the opposite direction, here's your C. C, B, A, G, F. That's 5 notes. You add a flat, and so you are in the key of F, 1 flat. But it's not the F that's flatted. It's actually the B that's flatted, but it is in the key of F. Then F, E, D, C, B. All right, B flat. So you add in the key of B flat, you add another flat. So you added 2 flats. You keep the flats or the sharps that you have, and you add 1 more. To the right, it's a sharp that you add every 5 notes, starting at the note that you stopped in and adding a sharp there. And then going to the left, it would be every 5 notes to the left, you add a flat. So you can tell, okay, so what's the key of D? C, D, E, F, G, 1 sharp, starting with that same note, G, A, B, C, D, all right, 2 sharps. D, E, F, G, A, 3 sharps, and so it goes. It'll go up to the end of the keyboard. So down here, C, B, A, G, F, 1 flat, and you start with that same F. F, E, D, C, B, that's going to be B flat, that's 2 flats, and then B, A, G, F, E, and the 3 flats as E. E flat is 3 flats. And you can do that. You can just count 5 in either direction from middle C. Now, you really need to have a keyboard to see that. They have something that's called the circle of fifths. I didn't bring it in, but at some point I will, and I have brought it in before, where everything is arranged in a circle, and you can just follow that circle. But it's just as easy to say, if you're looking at a keyboard, the sharp is going to be to the right, the flats are going to be to the left, and you can figure out 5 notes by 5 notes by 5 notes all the way up and all the way down. It'll be flats if you go down. Now, I'm kind of a bugger because wherever I teach, I want a keyboard or a poster that has a keyboard on it to show these things to students. Because if you learn how to play an instrument, say you're learning clarinet, you will learn clarinet, how to play it, you know how the keys are, you know how to blow into it, you know how to finger the notes, and the clarinet is complicated because it has 2 fingering patterns, excuse me, one for the upper register and one for the lower register, and all of that. But how do you know? Where are these notes coming from? How come something is in the key of F? How come something's in the key of C or G or whatever the key is? How do you figure that out? How do you see it? Well, you need a keyboard to see it. And when I can bring a keyboard, even a small one, even a poster, although I rather have an actual keyboard, I can point all of this out. This is a middle C. When you're playing your low C, as far as a piano is concerned, it's a middle C, but it's called a low C for the woodwinds because the woodwinds can't get any lower, or most of them can't. And so you can show them, this is where it is. If you're in the key of D, well, that's two sharps. Which one's a sharp? Well, you've got an F sharp. You know, you've got an F sharp and you've got a C sharp. So you learn where those notes are and how those notes relate with each other, and you can't do it without a keyboard. I don't know a whole lot of chords because as I was learning music, and I've studied music all my life, woodwinds can't play chords. Now they do play arpeggios, which are like chords, but you play one note at a time. You can't play them together. Guitars, keyboards, violins, you know, these kinds of instruments, stringed instruments, they can play more than one note at a time, and so you can get chords. But for a woodwind, you can only play one note at a time. I'm fond of telling my sister, who's a classical pianist, I say to her, one note, one finger. You can use one finger and play one note. If you use 8 fingers, you can play 8 notes. We may use, as woodwind people, 8 fingers to play one note. If I play a low D on a recorder, I've actually got to use 7 fingers to play that low D. B, A, G, F, E, D, plus the thumb hole in the back. Now, if I'm playing an octave, it's a little different. I only need one finger to play the D, high D, but the high D is like this, and you have to use your fingers to balance it. One note at a time, but you may need several fingers to play it if you're playing a woodwind, but not if you're playing a keyboard or an organ. An organ does chords. You can even play one note, and if you use the proper stops, you can get chords out of that. So it is complicated, and the only way to see how these notes relate to each other is to actually see it on a keyboard. So I usually, when I teach students, I give them a notebook with things in it, you know, the scales and fingerings and the things I want them to have, and how to count music, how to count the time, and I usually include a miniature keyboard that I've marked out a little bit like this. This is your middle C on the staff. This is where it is on the keyboard, you see, and here's your G. Here it is on the staff, and here it is on the keyboard. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Or if you start with A, you can start like I'll start down here. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it goes back to A again. You don't have note P, a note H, a note Q. It goes right back to A. So if you start at A, you end up in an octave with another A. And then, but it doesn't go further than that. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then back to A again. Well, why is that? It has to do with the way that we hear music. You know, if we had a different set of ears, we might be able to hear more. There might be a note called P or Q, but we don't have that because there's no way we can hear it. What we hear when we get to G, the next note up, what we hear is another A, an octave above the A that was below it, which is an octave above the A which is below that. It's just based upon the way we physically are able to hear. So what I've done here is I've taken the scale and I've written the C major scale all the way up. I've done it in 2 octaves. I'll push this over a little bit so you can see it. And I've written the notes above the keyboard, where they are on the keyboard, so that people who are playing woodwinds will have some sense of what the keyboard is and what it can do and how the notes relate to each other. And this is the way that I do it. Now, I do want to show you some other things, and I will close this off for a second. I've had in here last time 2 Israeli recorders. They're made in Israel. This is a cedar one that belonged to me anyway, and this I recently purchased, and I do believe it's also cedar, although it's so heavily stained to look like chocolate brown that you can't tell for sure. They're beautiful instruments. Well, what came with this one, which is what I recently bought, was music books, and I want to show you the Israeli music books. This was done by the Trapp family singers, and it's a regular music book that you would use. I want to point out in the last page is your fingering chart. I'll just hold that up. Yeah, fingering chart. I don't think that's easy to read. It's possible to read it. What I like to do is to take 1 or 2 notes at a time, put them on the staff, and then show them on the keyboard and show the fingerings of them on an instrument. And I think that's a lot easier to read. It makes my fingering charts a lot bigger. And what I do is I do it page by page by page, 1 or 2 notes at a time. But this is a traditional kind of fingering chart that you find in the music books. And it's a good book. There's nothing wrong with this book. Here's the front of it. You can see that the left hand goes on top, the right hand goes on the bottom. A lot of students, when they're trying to teach themselves, try to do it in reverse, but that's not the way it is. In every woodwind instrument, modern woodwind instrument, you have the left hand always on top. Now here, you have a fingering chart on top. I don't know how well you can see that, but it shows the 6 keys, the major keys, B, A, G, F, E, D, and then it shows you what the fingering is on that and shows it on the staff. And that's the kind of thing I think that is better. So this is a traditional music book by the Von Trapp family. And here's another one that came with it, a recorder guide. And it's a big, kind of thick book. It has a lot of older type drawings in it, which, I mean, they're interesting for an adult. This is the way they used to draw, but it's not modern. Students wouldn't be interested. But they have some interesting things in here. Here's another one of these interesting old drawings that you get. Now, what I want to point out to you, if I can find the right page, I've got a couple of pages here. I'll only show you one. This is a fingering chart that has both the bass fingerings in the key of F and the fingerings for C melody, which is in treble clef. Now, both of this is written in treble clef, but the fingerings for the Fs are different than the fingerings for the C melody. I do the C melody because it blends in, and it's what most people play, and it's also possible to play a lot of music in other keys. You know, you don't get that with the Fs. It's more complicated, so I stick with the C melody. But at any rate, here's a typical fingering chart. And what's good about this, I don't know if you can get close enough to see it. It has both fingerings, the F fingering and the C fingering for different notes, because they are different. And if we can get kind of a close-up of that, that would be good. So I'll hold it up for just a second. Perfect. You will notice that some of the fingerings are squarish. Well, down here, if you note, some of them are square and some of them are round. The square fingerings represent the fingerings for the F instruments. The round is the fingerings for the treble clef instruments, like the C melody. And you can see in some ways those fingerings are similar, but in some ways they're different too. I mean, if you take a look at, and I'm looking here at this note right here, you can see the obvious difference in the fingerings between the bass clef notes and the treble clef notes. Or if you look on your left to that first square on your left, it may be more obvious. And some notes there's not too much difference, but there is on other notes. So you have to remember that if you are playing an F instrument, and that would be the sopranino, the alto, and the folded bass, you're going to get a different fingering pattern. The key of C is going to be your C melody, and your tenor, they're going to be in the key of C, and the great bass, which I've explained that I don't have, so I can't show it to you, those are all in the key of C. The sopranino, alto, and folded bass are all in the key of F. So the fingering patterns are going to be somewhat different. I will only deal, though, with those in the key of C because they blend so much with the instruments that people are already playing. So I guess I don't have time to show you much more. I just want to kind of give you a sense of what size these instruments are and how beautiful they are. And, you know, if you take something like a bass, and this is the folded bass, the straight basses are much taller than this, but you take that in comparison with a sopranino, what a difference in the size. So what a difference in the kind of tone that you're going to get when you play them. Yet at the same time, they're both in the key of F. So at any rate, I need to have you see these, and I also wanted to have you see the music books that come with the Israeli recorders. And there was one picture, I don't know if I have time to show it to you or not. It showed, well, I'll tell you about it. It showed in the book that came with the Israeli recorder, it showed a person sitting there playing their recorder with their legs crossed. You never sit that way. When you're holding an instrument, you sit up straight. You put your feet flat on the floor, and you don't cross your legs, and you don't take weird positions. There was one picture of somebody stooped down on one knee bent, and one knee somehow crooked some way. You need to, with any instrument you play, you have to have the right position. You have to be sitting up straight. You have to have your hands in the right position, your feet on the floor, because if you start getting your legs all twisted up, or you cross your legs or whatever, you're going to cut out the amount of oxygen that your lungs can get, and you don't get enough oxygen. It might make a difference in the way you sound because you don't have your full breath. So you have to do it right. And I'm sorry I didn't pick up those pictures and photocopy them, but at any rate, just take my word for it. So you have to take things, when you look at a picture in a book, you have to see if it's accurate or if it's not accurate. In this case, it wasn't. But the books themselves are good. They're older, and I want to just give you a chance to see the scope of what's out there musically. So I'm going to close it here. We don't have any more time. I'll be doing something else next time. Please join me then.